Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Recently, we got word of a bunch of different gameplay updates and various other things that Sledgehammer is working on or looking into for Modern Warfare 3. We're talking some major changes to gameplay, some potential quality of life updates, a lot of various things that could help improve MW3 even more. So as we get into everything that was just revealed or brought up, if you are new to the channel, every single day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. So if you're not subscribed yet, you want to guarantee that every day you're up to date with news, updates, meta breakdowns, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. And if you enjoyed this video, if you're excited for some of these updates, be sure to let me know by dropping a like on it. It is always seriously appreciated. So this actually happened earlier on last week. Some of the devs from Sledgehammer sat down with Repulse on the Pulse Check podcast that he does, and there was basically an hour or so where Hector was able to ask the devs about various different questions that he gathered either himself or from his community or from Twitter, whatever the case may be. And the devs went pretty in depth on a lot of different things, previewed some things that will or won't be coming to MW3 in future seasons, talked about how they're approaching certain updates here, and we get some very interesting information out of this in general. So for instance, they started off by talking about slide canceling, and obviously we've already seen several changes to the slide cancel mechanics so far this year in terms of how it affects tac sprint and everything going on there. And one thing that the devs sort of reiterated throughout this conversation is that slide canceling is mainly a mechanic for gunfights now and not a mechanic for movement in terms of traversal. Obviously it's a movement mechanic, but they don't want to make slide canceling this thing that is mandatory if you're trying to get from point A to point B faster than either running or doing this other thing, maybe trying to go out of your way to find a zippy or something, whatever the case may be, so you can jump off and parachute. They don't want to make players force slide canceling into their movement just so they could traverse places faster. That was not the intended goal there. It was mainly a mechanic for gunfights, so you could use movement to your advantage and try and master things to add in more of a skill gap for those in particular. So for those looking for slide cancel as a mechanic that's going to speed up how you can get from point A to point B, that's likely not something that's ever going to change this year, either in multiplayer or Warzone, for what it's worth. Another big movement thing that they actually touched on here is snaking. This is, in my opinion, a tactic that is much more advantageous in a gunfight than something like slide canceling, because it's basically making your character and your hitbox incredibly annoying to master. It's the process of basically crouching and proning back to back to back while you're also headying an object in game. This is very common in the CDL, and this is actually something they are already looking into potentially changing. They're trying to figure out how exactly they could balance this so that it doesn't hinder gameplay or cause hitches in certain areas when you are trying to, let's say, drop shot or crouch spam in certain areas, but also make it so that it's not a mechanic that is busted in a way that's giving players extreme advantages in gunfights. So very interesting that Sledge is already so in depth in listening to various different movement complaints, or movement feedback, I should say. It's not necessarily just complaints, but they're all ears right now on these various updates in terms of what players may or may not want to see changed when it comes to the movement metas this year, which is, in my opinion, very cool and a nice change of pace from the last year of COD, obviously. Something that the devs did confirm is going to be coming here soon, though, is actually a stamina bar in game. And this is a very cool feature. This is going to make it much easier to see when exactly you're going to be able to tac sprint yet again. So this is mainly in the case of movement. It'll show your refresh for your sprint and tac sprint, I would imagine. And this is because when you do end up slide canceling, right now it's basically pausing the refresh on your tac sprint. So the fastest way to get it back naturally would be to just continuously sprint. And that's sort of calling back to that first topic there of not using slide canceling to move places faster. That's going to be a big quality of life update and a UI update that's going to give you even more information on your screen. So definitely looking forward to that one. And apparently that one's coming here pretty soon. The devs did also bring up the topic of bunny hopping, another movement mechanic that currently is absent in Modern Warfare 3, and they did say they were looking into testing this to sort of see if there was a more balanced way they could bring it back to gameplay here. So it does seem like in the future we may see maybe an experimental playlist or one update in particular that tests the B-hop feature in some way, shape, or form. Who knows if it's going to be one-to-one to that of MW 2019 and Warzone 1, or if it'll be different in some way, shape, or form, but the bunny hop could be coming back here in a future update. They also mentioned that when it comes to input in-game controller versus keyboard and mouse, they've heard a lot of complaints and feedback in regards to keyboard and mouse, sort of feeling like there's some kind of input lag or a slight delay in this game. And they said that they are looking into this to see what can be done to actually adjust this, whether it's on the peripheral end, whether it's on the game's end, whatever the case may be. Where exactly are these things hitching? Where exactly could they improve things so that it is more of a universal fix rather than just, specific peripherals in general. So it is nice that, again, they're just listening to that feedback there. They didn't clarify if they had any fixes in the works, but it is something they are investigating. The devs also talked about prestiging, and this is something that is always a very hot topic every year. I know a lot of players right now are wanting to see the classic prestige back from the original CODs, where you reach rank 55 or whatever the max rank is, and then you can prestige and start again, and then do it again, prestige, back to level 1, prestige, back to level 1, all the way up to whatever max prestige is. It actually gives more of an incentive to earn base rank XP in this game outside of those first 55 levels where you're just leveling up things and unlocking new things for your created class, right? And this is actually something that the devs sounded kind of disappointed in when they had to talk about it. Classic Prestige will not be coming back. We are going to see Prestige return here with Season 1 and then all the seasons moving forward, but it's going to be the same seasonal Prestige system moving forward that we had in MW2. So, for instance, with Season 1, we'll probably see the level cap increase from 55 to, let's say, 250, and then Season 2 is 250 to 500, 500 to 650, 650 to 800, 800 to 1,000, whatever the case is, whatever the numbers are. That's the Prestige system that's back, and it did seem like the devs were a bit disappointed in the fact that they couldn't do Classic Prestige. It almost seemed like Activision is sort of in charge of that, saying, hey, it's COD HQ, we're doing the seasonal Prestige now, you just have to create the emblems for that, we're not going to do any other systems. So that's a bit of a bummer there. It was also mentioned that the devs were interested in doing a weapon prestige system. So you max out your weapon on its max rank and then you can prestige it and you get something special for it. But unfortunately, that was not something that they were able to get to. And that's the effect of Modern Warfare 3 being a more rushed game than the previous CODs. As we talked about in the report the other day, this game was only developed in 16 months as opposed to usually the 2 to 3 year cycle that most CODs have. So maybe if it got the full dev time, weapon prestige would have been something we could have had in game. Another bummer there for sure. And the devs did also sound kind of bummed out that they didn't get to add that in, because it did seem they were excited about talking about that and were hopeful they could have gotten it done in time. Now, next up, moving on, another thing that the devs talked about was servers. And they did actually report that so far with Modern Warfare 3, this is the smoothest launch ever in terms of server crashes and game crashes. So they were pretty proud that the game is running stably for the most part. Now, of course, there are crashes here and there. There is a lot of packet loss and packet burst. And in response to that, the devs did say that we do have more server updates coming. They did not get into specifics here, but they did say that is always something they're monitoring, and with stability updates, there's going to be more of those rolling out in future patches and more significant server updates in the future. So hopefully we see some big changes there, some big improvements, so that there's not as consistently packet loss or server lag in any given match of multiplayer or Warzone for that matter. They also talked a little bit about some upcoming content updates as well, some interesting things here. The idea of quick fix in Modern Warfare 3 was brought up because obviously health regen in this game is pretty slow. You kind of have to rely on stim tacticals for that. And with a quick fix perk or gear, that could definitely be a game changer for sure, again, in multiplayer or Warzone. And the devs did say that in future seasons, they plan on adding in some new boots and some new gear as well. And quick fix could definitely be a possibility there. So it wasn't a guarantee, yes, it's going to be coming to the game in season 2 or something, but they were definitely receptive to that idea and did confirm that throughout the seasonal updates, not only are we going to get the basic stuff of battle passes and operators and weapons, but eventually we will see new boots and new gear and other perks implemented as well. They did also confirm that more weapon changes are going to be coming soon, some weapon buffs and weapon nerfs, and in specific, they are recognizing that the SMG category is a little bit underwhelming right now. Most of those weapons aren't all that competitive. There's a couple that are decent. However, for the most part, it does seem like they're largely underwhelming, so I would not be surprised whatsoever if we saw some significant SMG buffs here in some weapon updates soon, and those could be coming potentially as early as this week. We're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, if any patch notes are dropping, you guys know I'm on those every single time right away, so just stick it here for that so you make sure you don't miss any of those changes coming. Also, on the topic of weapons, they did mention that further on down the road, they plan on making more changes to MW2 guns in seasonal updates, and actually eventually looking at more recoil-based changes and visual noise-based changes. Right now, there are some minor changes with the MW2 weapons compared to MW2 specifically in terms of their visual smoke and weapon recoil and visual bounce and whatnot, but it's definitely not as similar to the MW3 guns, which are super low recoil for the most part. So it does seem like in future seasons, once the devs are able to get to it, there's going to be a lot of changes to MW2 guns to make them lower recoil and easier to use overall, which should be pretty interesting for future meta updates. Another disappointing one here, but we do get official clarification on it. There is no plans for an ultimate mastery camo right now for all games. So for instance, this would only apply to zombies as of now, but if you went through and then got the mastery camos and zombies for all MW2 guns and all MW3 guns, players are speculating, hey, maybe there's like a secret camo at the end of that. The devs did confirm it was something they thought about, but as of right now, there's no plans for some ultimate cross-game camo if you complete all games mastery challenges. They did mention that, again, going back to weapon talk here, there's going to be more updates to the gunsmith and the firing range. As of right now, the firing range is a little bit busted. The dummy's health is not correct. It's 100 base health instead of 150, so they are going to be fixing that. But in general, they would like to do more updates to the firing range and make that a little bit more in-depth. Then also the gunsmith with the advanced stats as well, going a little bit extra with those and adding in more references for weapon stats and details there. So definitely good news for that. They talked a little bit about the experimental playlist. We've already seen some cool things happening with that, being able to actually test new updates in game. They wanted to reiterate that the experimental playlist is just that. It is just an experiment. It's not something that is going to absolutely come into the game every single time a new change is implemented. So for instance, the player outlines, they're going to gather their feedback on that and say, okay, clearly players liked this or players did not like this. If they liked it, we'll add it to the full game. If they didn't, well, we won't. There's also going to be instances where they try something experimental and the devs don't like it. They're like, oh yeah, you know, in application it didn't really work, you know, on paper it sounded cool, but we're not really fans of this. So the experimental playlist is not final. It does not mean guaranteed changes. It is just there to experiment and mess around and see what the feedback is like. They also talked a little bit about controller binding and specific separate binds for diving and sliding. Obviously, this is a big deal on controller right now because with slide cancel back, you want to be able to tap to slide, but at the same time, diving for things like Warzone to get that parachute momentum or to, you know, escape danger is clutch. And right now, if you want to have both of those buttons bound, you have to have like tap to slide and hold to dive. But then when you're going to do that, there's a slight input delay because the controller has to see, okay, is this person going to tap or are they going to hold? It's not instantaneous. So having separate binds for those would be clutch, and the devs are working on a way to try and see if that is actually viable for controller players with certain button layouts. And then lastly, they did talk a little bit about aim assist as well here, and basically they recognize that yes, there's that always ongoing aim assist is OP conversation. Some players absolutely do need it, but for good players it is something that can be used and abused, and the devs basically are looking into if it is worth changing aim assist. How would they actually change it so that it's still useful for the players who need it, but not wildly overwhelming if a controller player is going against keyboard and mouse? Now for me personally, I think the easiest way to do that is input-based matchmaking. I don't think COD will ever do that because it's going to split the player base and that's not good for their retention, but they did say maybe a way to balance this is to have less aim assist options. So instead of having Black Ops and default and focusing and precision, they just had one, because then they could just focus on that one and see how they balance it. Otherwise they have to go through and say, okay, is default balanced here? Okay, maybe. Is focusing balanced here? Yes, we don't need to adjust that, but Black Ops is super bad, so how do we adjust this one? You know, whatever the case is, whatever the example is you want to make, they thought maybe that could be a solution, but that's not final or anything. It's just something they are investigating as of right now. But a lot of transparency, a lot of cool sort of looks behind the curtain, if you will, as to what the devs are investigating, looking into, actually confirming for future updates. Some very cool things are in the works, it seems, so we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for when these changes go live. You guys know I got you covered whenever there are new announcements, any official changes made in game. I'll be posting about them right here, so stick it here for that alongside everything else going on in COD by hitting that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it as well. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.